Quick follow-up to yesterday's video. In case you didn't see it, I made a video talking about how I was considering switching to the Takaroka division for X rank for next season because the top end of the Tenatech division is much less fleshed out, and it felt like I wasn't getting players with as much experience and that I would learn more going to the other division. But I did get some good answers from players who have been in both divisions and would have the experience to know what to recommend, and having considered what they said, I've changed my mind about switching divisions next season. I'm just going to be staying in Tenatech. So I want to share what they said so you can be informed by what they said the way that I was and make the decision that's best for you. I'm making the decision that's best for me. I leave it up to you to decide what's best for you. So the first comes from Pika, from Cherry Limeade, which is, if you didn't know, a very high-level North American team, but you should probably have heard of Cherry Limeade. They're pretty cool. Pika says, I switched to Takaroka for this current season. So Pika played in Tenatech last season and Takaroka this season. At the end of Chill season in Tenatech, I was above 2,900 XP, trying to reach 3K, and wasn't able to for weeks and never made it. Not because of losing games, but because I couldn't find any at all. I'd go entire rotations trying to queue without finding a single match in zones. So I switched to Takaroka, hoping that the higher general skill level and player population would keep me finding lobbies and higher powers next time. I haven't hit 2,900 yet, but currently around 2,700, I'm still finding lobbies on essentially every attempt, and the caliber of top 500 lobbies in Takaroka feels like night and day compared to Tenatech. So at this point, Takaroka feels great. However, the grind to get a decent enough power to start getting paired with other high-power players to start with felt much worse in Tenatech in my opinion. Lower power JP lobbies, 2,500 XP and below, don't play any differently or better from Western lobbies, except there's now latency that you also have to power through, so it can feel even less meaningful or within your control to play in those. With that in mind, I think Takaroka is worth it for those who have the confidence they truly can throw their weight around with some of Japan's best and learn from it, but at some point the domino effect Gem brought up, this, by the way, just for context, I talked about how top-level players from the West will want to play with top-level players from Japan, so they'll go over, and then high-level players will want to play with the top-level Western and Japanese players, and so they'll go over, and so on until, high-level, mid-level, they'll all want to be over on the Takaroka server. But Pika is saying at some point that domino effect Gem brought up will have a breaking point, or at the very least leave a large portion of the incoming Western population of Takaroka quite disappointed, as they won't actually get to appreciate the higher match quality at higher powers. In summary, it looks like the value you get from switching to Takaroka is that you can find matches more readily at high Glico powers, and that there's a deeper pool of top-level players that you'll actually learn something playing against. However, below around 2,500 X power, you'll still be able to find plenty of matches on the NA servers, and you'll be playing those matches with lower latency against players that you still have plenty to learn from. So if you're below that level, you should probably just stay in Tenatech Division. The second comes from an anonymous Japanese player. They say, I understand where you guys are standing at, and I understand why Western players want to switch servers, but from our point of view, it's just bothering. Compared to Splatoon 2, Splatoon 3 is really laggy already on the game of Japanese player versus Japanese player. What happens when Western players come? It's not hard to imagine. I just hope I won't get foreigner opponents, and pray that you guys won't be hosting the match. It's just ridiculous. So anything that Japanese players can do? Not much. I know that the skill base of Western players isn't low, so even if I reach around 2,800 X power, I still need to pray for every single match. Whether this player's experience is representative of the rest of the scene and their opinions is difficult to determine, but it does corroborate the idea that more latency does cause issues in matches, and it seems to suggest that at least some Japanese players don't like that there is a higher likelihood that players are joining from far enough away to worsen the connections, especially when those players end up being assigned to host the lobby. Gregoru makes a similar point to Pika, that at a certain point you start running out of matches in Tentatech Division, but that before that point, Tentatech is probably a better play experience. He says, I'll offer my experience. I'm in the US and I've played in Tentatech both seasons. I did this because it seems like that's what the devs wanted me to do, and I was concerned about lag. Season 1, when I was seeing everyone get pretty eye-popping scores, I wanted in on that, and set my goal at getting 2700. In Splatoon 2, I had reached 2600 a few times. So, to put that into context, this is like a player on the cusp between mid and high level. A top-level player like Pika, is looking for 2900, 3k, that sort of peak. Gregoru is at a higher point than I am at, but at a lower point than Pika, so kind of in between. Gregoru goes on to say, I fell short of that, so I resigned myself to aiming for top 500 in every mode, which I did accomplish. It felt like a good challenge, especially coming off of Anarchy battles, though I'll admit most games could have their outcome predicted by which team had more splashes. This season, it's definitely rougher. Top 500 has not been difficult at all, but at 2600, the struggle is even finding a match. There's a lot of pressure to stay warmed up in the waiting room for 20 plus minutes until you find a match, and then feel like you have to carry and knowing that a loss will be devastating. The long time to queue makes it hard to regain points you do lose, which is giving me flashbacks to Splatoon 2, when one loss could erase 2 hours of progress. So, Gregoru is having a similar problem to Pika, albeit less so. Pika was saying that it takes an entire rotation sometimes without finding a match. Gregoru is finding one sometimes, in 20 minutes or more, but is still finding them a little bit more readily. But once you start getting to about that 2600 point or so, like he's saying, you start to run out of people that can actually get matched with you. So that's something to consider there. And Gregory's opinion is that they disagree that the system should continue. We're 7 months after release and wait times are already a problem. Wait until League battles come out. And that is, a good point against League battles here. It might be why they're holding back on them a little bit, since we've already got Anarchy open. Wait until people just get bored and drop the game after they've had their fill. I only see things getting worse. I'd much rather just play players at my skill level, regardless of where they are located, rather than have to guess the decisions of others and have to live with those consequences for a quarter of a year. It'd be nice to have a cooler badge or some higher power that I can post about on Twitter and brag, but I just want fair matches in a timelier manner, and further splitting the player base works against that goal. Given these perspectives, I think I personally will probably stick around in the Tentatek division until such time as I'm starting to run out of matches to play, at which point I'll consider switching. Like I've said, I'm not a top player. When I talked in my last video about how you, the viewer, are statistically speaking not likely at all to be a top player, I'm included in that statistic. Lots of folks got defensive when I talked about that, and I'd encourage you to consider where those feelings are coming from. I'm not interested in blaming anyone for not being a top player. For a lot of people, the lifestyle that gets you to that skill level may not even be healthy. If hearing that there's someone else who's better than you at this game makes you angry, realize that one of the first and most important tips I give anyone for improving is to foster humility in yourself. If you can't recognize that you have more to learn, if your insecurity stops you from recognizing when you're making a mistake, you can't expect to fix it. While the orange crown definitely doesn't feel earned right now, I don't want to have to put up with worse latency or make others have to put up with worse latency when I could still be learning elsewhere. I do occasionally have matches time out on me, particularly when I get up close to my peak powers, but not so much yet that it feels difficult to play the game. And I do think I still have some things to learn where I'm at. Hopefully this reflection has helped y'all make a more informed decision for yourselves.